Just Baseball Show is live. Are we live from the winter meetings? No, I'm not. Peter isn't, but Aram is. So we're going to chat with Aram, who's in Orlando right now. But the MLB winter meetings are underway. Thanks for joining us on the Just Baseball Show. Jack McMullen, Peter Apple. Thanks for joining us on Spotify, on Apple Pods, if you're listening audio wise. Thank you for joining us on YouTube, or thank you for joining us with our friends at Sports Grid. We got a couple of guys that are seemingly available on the trade market. We're going to start with that. We had a rumored deal, or at least a confirmed deal, that we'll talk about at the very, very end of the show as it pertains to a certain slugger that hit north of 50 homers in 2025. But in the middle, we check in with Ryan Finkelstein, Just Baseball's editor-in-chief, about the Mets' pursuit of the offseason, how the starting pitching market could move. And then, of course, we hear from Aram Layton, who is in Orlando at MLB's winter meetings. Peter Apple, before we get to the trade front and the biggest story in baseball as it stands right now, who we brought to you by?
BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Remember, folks, download BetMGM, whether that be on iOS or Android, and use promo code JustBaseball. Why? You get a first bet offer up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first wager loses. Just remember, gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 years or older. Terms and conditions apply. Let's talk trades.
So the big news today is that Mackenzie Gore and CJ Abrams are both possibly available in trade conversations. This came from a couple of different sources. Ken Rosenthal was on it as well. Here's the thing. Mackenzie Gore has been a long talked about possible trade chip. He has 2 years of team control left. The Washington Nationals, if we learned anything in 2025, are very, very far away. They have a new lead decision maker on the baseball operations side in Paul Taboni, and it seems like he's willing to get younger. Heck, they hired a 33-year-old manager. So I think he's totally fine in the rebuild and taking this organization, breaking it down to the bones, and building it from scratch here. Gore makes sense. Abrams, meanwhile, was a bit of a wrinkle here. And that was fascinating, Peter Apple. What do you make of CJ Abrams' trade candidacy?
At first, it was surprising, right? You got a 25-year-old who you acquired as one of the main pieces in the Juan Soto deal. But then you also got to consider that Mackenzie Gore is another one of the pieces that they acquired in the Juan Soto deal. So that tree is going to be certainly interesting. But it makes sense, right? Because if you look at the Nationals and you look at the remaining years on both of these two players' deals, right? We're looking at arbitration over the next few years. Will they be competitive? And one thing that I've said about the Nationals that is unfortunately very mean, but I think it is true, is that this team is worse than a lot of people think. When you think Nationals, you think James Wood and, of course, Abrams and Gore, and you think they have this young nucleus cooking. But the reality is that the rest of the team brought the Nationals down even from 2024. This team is not ready to compete, and I think their general manager sees that, so might as well capitalize on these assets. And I want to start with CJ Abrams because I want to talk about Mackenzie Gore landing spots a little bit later, but I think we all know the drill. We've talked about Gore at length, but we haven't really gotten the opportunity to talk about Abrams. And before I talk about landing spots for Abrams, because that's almost the easiest spot, I want to ask you, if you're a general manager, who would you rather trade for? Brendan Donovan or CJ Abrams? And the reason I bring that up is Abrams is 4 years younger and he has an extra year of control. But in terms of money, they're about the same price. Obviously, you have CJ Abrams, who is a former top prospect, only 25 years old, but he's not nearly as consistent of a player as Brendan Donovan. And you might also ask, well, why are you comparing the two? Abrams is a shortstop. Donovan is the second baseman. Are we sure Abrams is a shortstop long-term? Because he was one of the worst defenders at the position. So I think if a team was acquiring Abrams, they would like to put him next to an established shortstop and hope he becomes one of the best second basemen in baseball. So I wanted to ask you that to kind of get a grasp of what a team would have to give up for CJ Abrams, because we just did Brendan Donovan mock trades just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, Abrams is insanely talented. And I'm not saying that Brendan Donovan isn't talented, but in terms of just talent and possible on-field performance, you're buying the ceiling of CJ Abrams 8 days a week. There's no doubt that CJ Abrams is the more valuable player when it comes to ability and talent, but in terms of consistency, Donovan is the more consistent player. If you look at offensive production and defensive production year in, year out, the money, the years of control, the age all factor in Abrams' camp. But you also run into the issue of CJ Abrams having flaws on his resume as it pertains to staying out all night in Chicago at the end of a year where they weren't competing, and possibly running into motor issues and on-field warm-ups, 4 hours before first pitch or 2 hours before first pitch, whatever it may be. I mean, you run into that when you haven't heard that necessarily about Donovan. I would, if I were a GM, I'm all over CJ Abrams. And if you presented similar trade structures between Abrams and Donovan, I'm taking Abrams literally every time.
Yeah, I would personally rather trade for Brendan Donovan because I think in those 3 years that you're getting him, you're going to get the more consistent player. But I understand if a team would be interested in the upside of a CJ Abrams, right? He's one of 5 shortstops in MLB history to have 55 home runs and 100 stolen bases before his age 25 season. There's your upside. But the reality is he's one of the worst defensive shortstops in the sport, coupled with the fact that it's a 740 OPS most years, right?
Yep.
He's got a low 300s OBP, but can you get more if you're able to trade for him? So the 4 best landing spots that I could come up with for CJ Abrams are, number 1, and these aren't in any particular order, the Houston Astros. The Astros are 24th in stolen bases. They could certainly use a speed demon like Abrams. Abrams can move to second, and you keep Altuve in the outfield. Do you want to go one by one and you react, or do you want me to give you all 4? And then
we frankly don't have time for that. We only have 3 minutes left on this segment, so give me all 4.
The San Francisco Giants, 29th in stolen bases. He could be their starting second baseman next to Willy Adames at shortstop. And the Atlanta Braves, they need a shortstop. I'm sure they'd be okay starting Mauricio Dubon, who is currently their projected starting shortstop, but CJ Abrams is a little bit more exciting, and he's obviously a young guy you can bring in. Last but certainly not least is the Seattle Mariners, right? They don't necessarily need the speed. They have a ton of guys who steal bases and, take first to third and are able to score from second to home, but they could use a second baseman instead of Cole Young if they don't think that he's ready. Out of those 4, the Astros, the Giants, the Braves, and the Mariners, who do you think is the best spot for Abrams?
Atlanta, and there isn't a doubt about that. This is their replacement for Ha-Sung Kim. If they don't want to go the Ha-Sung Kim route again on free agency, marry that again, and Kim had a decent last month of the season with Atlanta, Abrams is the fit there, and Abrams is also an Atlanta area native. We've got about 90 seconds here, and it's okay because we talk about Mackenzie Gore a little bit more with Aram Layton, who is in Orlando. But Mackenzie Gore, where are your landing spots for him?
Mackenzie Gore, quick landing spot. So I think the Orioles are obvious. The Orioles are the landing spot for any starting pitcher, whether that be in free agency or through trades. The San Francisco Giants, they said that, they want to back off the 9-figure starting pitching deals. Mackenzie Gore isn't that, and he's a young guy that they can certainly build around in that rotation. I think the New York Mets are an obvious landing spot. The only problem is in division, would the Nationals and Mets want to make a move like that, especially when he's the Nationals' top guy? I'm sure they'd like to find a different trade partner. And then last, again, but certainly not least, the Chicago Cubs. I think it's an obvious partner.
So the Cubs intrigue me. I certainly make a pitch for San Francisco a little bit later on in this program, and I highly encourage you to stick around for that San Francisco pitch because it's a heck of a lot more simple than you would imagine it being, with a certain high-level prospect possibly being available on the San Francisco side. So I feel like San Francisco and Chicago are the 2, no?
Yeah. Orioles are so primed to make a move
but they might
this.
pay a free agent.
Yeah, but they should definitely be involved. And then you could say the Red Sox, but I think after grabbing Oviedo and Sonny Gray, I think they're done.
They could be done. It would be fun if they waded into the Gore waters, but with how much they have, I totally understand if they don't. Red Sox interested in pitching, Baltimore interested in pitching. We know for sure the New York Mets are interested in pitching. We're going to hear from Ryan Finkelstein, the editor-in-chief of Just Baseball, right now. The editor-in-chief of JustBaseball.com joins us, Ryan Finkelstein. He's chatting the winter meetings in Orlando. We're going to hear from Aram Layton, who is in Orlando a little bit later on in the program. But we've got Ryan here from more South Florida than Orlando, Central Florida, to just talk about the Mets, talk about which markets could materialize immediately, and a little bit more. I want to start with your Metropolitans, though. You see the flag in the background. You see the David Wright, 5 in the background as well. They feel like the dormant player right now, the sleeping giant of the offseason, and they're always the active giant of the offseason, at least since Steve Cohen has stepped into his current role now. Do you feel like this week could be somewhat intriguing for the New York Mets, or is this just kind of, hey, you know what, we'll stand pat, we got Devin Williams, we're going to hang out?
I think it's definitely intriguing because to me, it feels like the Mets are due to make a big trade at some point this offseason, and winter meetings are a great time for a big trade to take place. So the Mets have a need in the outfield after trading Brandon Nimmo. So could they go in on Jarren Duran at the top of the market, or could they take a flyer on a Luis Robert? I think any of those trades could happen. And then when it comes to their rotation, they obviously need a frontline arm. Today, there was some reporting that they're not going to be giving out a long-term deal in free agency. What does that mean? Does that mean that they're out on Framber Valdez if he gets a 5-year deal? Is that too long? If so, then it really is just strictly the trade market, I think. So that was an interesting report this morning, just that they are not in on a long-term deal. But again, in this market, how many guys are going to get the long-term deal? It could still keep everything pretty wide open.
It's just so vague to me that they wouldn't be in on a long-term deal. I guess I just need the definition of a long-term deal, because if you've got a 5-year deal that is cheaper than some 3-year deals because of the quality of player, now it's a little weird, those waters, who's to say that a 5-year deal is going to be cheaper than a 3, but I'm just thinking like, okay, you've got pitcher A that wants 5 for $150, and you've got pitcher B that wants 4 for $130. Which one are you actually going to go with? I find it a little weird that they would immediately discount one of them. But I also had this moment with Buster Olney of ESPN when he joined us on Saturday. And I wanted to run a question by him that's just been burning in my brain with the upcoming labor negotiation and the possible lockout after the 26 season going into 27. I just wonder what is affected, because obviously we know the free agent market is affected. I want to know what it is. Is it the AAV, the average annual value of these contracts over a 5-year deal? Is it the length of contract? Hey, we're not going to go 6 years because that's too many years that we're grandfathered into your contract, and we'd like to keep it short, but we'll pay a little bit more money. I'm just trying to figure out which part of the contract structure is most heavily influenced by the upcoming labor dispute and the possible resolve that we could get. Do you have any feeling as to which piece of the contract could be altered?
It's so hard to tell. I mean, for a team like the Mets, you'd wonder if they're just overall trying to be cautious about too much long-term spending because of the potential of a salary cap. But it also, I could argue both sides of it, because the other side of the coin is spend while you can and figure it out later. So I think the way that I would imagine this is going to impact things primarily is sort of the middle of the market. I feel like it's always that way in sports, right? Like the top of the market is never really affected by these things. And it's more the middle to the bottom of the market that we see a little bit of an impact. So I don't know if this necessarily is going to impact the very top free agents, but it is interesting that it just seems very quiet in free agency. And it seems like teams, if they can address their needs through trades first and lock in more fixed, reasonable costs, maybe people just want to be a little bit more cautious just with the fear of the unknown.
You're taking the bird in the hand in terms of team control when it comes to trades. You're also taking the commodity that could be altered by a new CBA, as opposed to the thing that wouldn't be altered. If you have it in writing that you are owed X amount of $1 million in 2029, then you know what? That team is out of luck when it comes to altering that deal in 29. So I'm just thinking that could be the way to do it if you feel like there are drastic changes to pay structure coming. The New York Mets have 7 to 8 top 100 prospects in baseball. When you expanded to 150, they could have 9 of the top 150 prospects in the game right now. Do you feel like David Stearns is waiting in the trade market, maybe even for people that, we've heard are unavailable? Obviously, it would take a lot to go and get Tarek Skubal from Detroit if he even is available, but reports seem to indicate Joe Ryan isn't going anywhere. The Mets are one of the very few teams that have the prospect capital to go force somebody's hand in Minnesota to get Joe Ryan. Do you feel like they could even pursue that?
I think so, because look, the report was they're not interested in the free agent starting pitchers on a long-term deal. Doesn't say anything about trading for a pitcher and extending them. And I think with both Joe Ryan and Freddie Peralta, you have that opportunity to trade for a guy and then maybe sign someone that you value more than all the pitchers that are on the free agent market. So I still look at Freddie Peralta, and it makes all the sense in the world for the Mets to put Brandon Sproat on the table as the main headliner in the piece. And, they can either, add a second arm to that. If they wanted to put a Jet Williams on the table, they could do that. There's a lot of ways that they could entice the Brewers to move off of the stance that they're keeping Freddie Peralta. And to me, he's the perfect ace for the Mets. And you leverage that last year of control at $8 million, and you lock him into a deal that's going to be a lot more team-friendly than the 7-year, $210 million deal that Dylan Cease just signed.
We're chatting with Ryan Finkelstein, who's the editor-in-chief at Just Baseball, and we're talking Mets right now. But you also mentioned the Dylan Cease deal, 7 years, $210 million. That was the first big move on the starting pitching front. And it seems like regardless of where you go, who you listen to, who you read, they're all thinking the starting pitching market is the one to materialize a lot quicker than the bats. Maybe Kyle Tucker signs, maybe Kyle Schwarber signs, but it's going to take a while for the bats to have homes. Meanwhile, starting pitching, once the bar is set, the other guys are going to follow because they have that North Star of a contract. It seems like the North Star is already out there in Dylan Cease getting 210. But I know that you've put together at justbaseball.com these contract predictions for these starting pitchers, and these are gaudy numbers. We've got about a minute left here, but I do want to even take this over to the next segment. How much of an overpay do you feel like a team is willing to make for a Ranger Suarez or even a Framber Valdez or a Michael King coming off injury?
I think what's interesting is how many of those guys are going to get the years. And if you're going to get the years, then I think the average annual value can be a little more reasonable. Like a Ranger Suarez, if he lands on a 5-year deal, maybe the AAV is a little over $20 million and it doesn't stretch towards the 30, or I guess for Cease when the deferrals came in, the $26 million that he got. But I think it really just depends on the pitcher. Like a guy like Ranger, Framber Valdez, those guys I think at the longer term, the guys with the risk off of injury, probably shorter term, just like Zac Gallen after underperformance, where I think it's shorter term opt-out type contracts.
That would make a lot of sense. We're going to keep this conversation going with Ryan Finkelstein after the break. You're listening to the Just Baseball Show. You're also watching it with our friends over at Sports Grid. More on the starting pitching free agent market next. Just Baseball Show rolls on. We are still joined by Just Baseball's editor-in-chief, Ryan Finkelstein. We're talking about the free agent market as the winter meetings in Orlando are officially underway for Major League Baseball. They too totally feel like they could be an email at points, the winter meetings, because there's so much dormancy. And then all of a sudden at 11 p.m., something happens. Tetsuya Imai has been posted for a while at this point, and it does seem like Tetsuya Imai could push past the price tag that Ranger Suarez is billed at and Framber Valdez is billed at. But there's more and more coming out about Imai's market, that he may be interested in this. He may not be interested in this. It seems like the Phillies are involved. It seems like the Mets could be involved. Oh, wow, now the Cubs are involved here. Do you feel like the Mets or really any other team is kind of the favorite to go grab the more fascinating pitcher on the market, the most unknown pitcher on the market?
I don't know if the Mets are necessarily the favorite. I don't know if Imai falls under the context of, we don't want to do the long-term deals, because it seems like he's going to get, I think, north of 5. I honestly think we could see Imai get a 7-year deal even. I think he has age on his side. And sometimes in free agency, a little bit of the unknown can kind of play to your benefit as well, where there's not any knocks on his resume other than just a question of will he translate. But the stuff obviously is great. The age really plays in. And I think he's also probably exciting some teams with his comments, talking about wanting to beat the Dodgers, talking about, being eager to get to that MLB competition. I think he's going to get a pretty big contract. And honestly, I think he probably gets, I would say, the largest total guarantee of the starting pitchers left on the market. I still think Framber would beat him on AAV, but I think there's a good chance this guy ends up with 7 years, and it's going to be well north of what Kodai Senga and Shota Imanaga got. It's not going to come close to Yoshinobu Yamamoto, but he's going to get a pretty good deal.
Take me into your decision maker mind. Take me into your baseball operations mind. And I know that's, an uncomfortable place for all of us to go. But if you're looking at this market right now and you're saying, I want bang for my buck, I want to optimize without blowing the bank on one guy, are you looking at a couple of them? Like for me, at least, I look at Michael King and I say, okay, the injury concerns, but I know exactly what you can do when you're on the field. That incentivizes me to go after you because your price point is a heck of a lot lower than some of these other guys. Ranger Suarez could make double the money Michael King does on the free agent market. But Michael King is the better pitcher when he's on the mound, fair and square. There are other guys like Zac Gallen on a bounce back. Intrigues me. There are other guys where I don't want to say dumpster diving, but you can go down the Dustin May train. I feel like I can fix him. I feel like my pitching staff can fix him. Let's go get a Dustin May. Are there people that jump out to you like that?
I think that it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for upside, Michael King 100%. That's the perfect answer. If you're looking for just innings, you go a little further down. You get to the Chris Bassett's, the Jose Quintanas in free agency. I think Merrill Kelly at some point is going to have a really big market because there's no qualifying offer attached. He is a little bit older, but a 2-year deal for Merrill Kelly, I think he's going to do really well. So I think it just depends on what you're looking for. If it's upside, then for the most part, it's going to be these guys with qualifying offers like Framber, Ranger, Michael King, Zac Gallen that are going to cost a lot and cost draft picks. If you're just looking for innings, there's some more guys a little further down that you can grab that aren't going to cost nearly as much.
Ryan Finkelstein, one of the last ones for you. What's up with Pete Alonso's market? I cannot figure that guy out for the life of me. There was a report that Pete is driving out to Tampa today to go chat with interested teams, or driving from Tampa to Orlando today to go chat with interested teams at the winter meetings. Is Pete Alonso pitching himself? Are we at this point where people forgot that Pete is a 30 homer, 100 RBI guy?
I don't understand how Kyle Schwarber has such an expansive market and Pete Alonso does not. And obviously there's Mets bias. So you can see it behind me. But I know that Kyle Schwarber had a better season. Don't get me wrong. But Pete Alonso can play a position. He's 2 years younger. I don't understand why Pete Alonso, it seems like he can't even get more than a 3-year deal. Like, why? That's the thing that blows my mind. I get not giving a first baseman a 7-year deal. But what risk has Pete Alonso showed in his career where you think he's going to age poorly? He plays every single game. He puts up 30 and near 100 every single season. It just blows my mind that teams aren't in on him. I don't know if everyone just thinks he's going back to the Mets, and so they're just not pursuing him. But I think teams could do a lot worse than Pete Alonso in free agency.
It is so hard for me to fathom, to your point, that Schwarber has twice the market Alonso has. I mean, I see these 5-year deals being thrown out for Kyle Schwarber. Why? Because he doesn't play a position. You can put Pete at DH. It doesn't matter. He can play first. But like that guy, when you look at what he's done over the course of his career, to your point, he's playing 150 games. He's hitting 30 to 40 homers. He's driving in 100 to 130 guys every given year. I understand that baseball is falling out of love with some of those numbers, but it just has to matter. We've got about 20 seconds. Yes or no? Pete Alonso in a New York Mets uniform in 26.
Of course.
Okay, good. Pete has the franchise home run record, and Ryan Finkelstein still believes Pete will be in Queens. Fink, as always, really appreciate you. We're going to pivot to Aram Layton, who is in Orlando next. Just Baseball Show rolls on, and now we have somebody sitting in a ballroom, I assume on the floor, in a corner of a ballroom in Orlando, Florida, at the MLB Winter Meetings. Aram Layton, I can't call you a guest of the show, but this is kind of a guest spot for you. You're filling a segment on the Harry Ford trade that sent Jose Ferrer to Seattle, and then you're also talking about the overall willingness to move prospects in a trade market right now with the free agent market stalling a little bit. It feels weird to say it's stalling on December 9th, but give me the lowdown. Carpeted floor? Are you feeling comfortable right now?
Yeah, we're carpeted. It's pretty comfortable. There's a lot of people here. I know this is for TV, so this is even funnier. But it is awesome. I think the second you walk in here, you feel like you need to start speculating on stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I need to just start conceiving trades, come up with different ideas. But no, it's already been awesome. There's just so many people here. You just walk by, it's like, oh, there's Nelson Cruz. Oh, there's Chris Young, who's 7 feet tall, by the way, which we knew, but like it's just another thing to see it in person. It's a who's who. It's cool. But I have a weird feeling, and this is based on nothing, that this is going to be a busier winter meetings than we've had in the last couple of years from a trade perspective, and maybe signing. I think we're going to get a little bit more moves than in the past. But
so I will say many articles have refuted that claim.
Yes,
many
correct.
people over the course of this past weekend or in the week prior have said that it's going to be a quiet winter meetings, which is exactly why things are going to happen, right?
Well, because I'm in a ballroom now and I need to speculate. So I'm going to speculate that all of that is right. No, so it's funny. Like we talked about it before we hit record, and I know even like Bendix and his media availability kind of alluded to it. It's like the winter meetings doesn't make anybody more accessible to anybody, right? Like you always have your room of help in the front office. GMs are always a phone call away from each other. So it really doesn't make a difference that you're all in the same, building or all in the same ballroom or whatever it may be. And that's why we've kind of seen the winter meetings not really turn into this just night and day, holy crap, here go all the moves. But I don't know. I feel there's nothing I can really put to it in particular, but I just feel things kind of building up to maybe just a surprising move or two that could be pretty fun. I'm a nerd, and I know you are too. I'm excited about the Rule 5 draft. I think there's some very fascinating players that could get taken in that. But I don't know. Something with the Harry Ford trade leading into this made me feel like we might get a little jump start of maybe something, during these winter meetings.
And it seems like activity could happen on the trade front. And I do just want to start with your immediate assessment of the Harry Ford deal. And Harry Ford was a top 100 prospect in baseball. He was on the outside looking in of the top 100 for you, or was he inside the top 100?
So he was before, and then the way he performed this year, he played himself back into the top 100 for us. And I thought that was the part that, wasn't maybe getting covered as much, because I think a lot of people were, you had the Mariners fans, right, that maybe aren't as tapped into the farm system, say, hey, there's our first round pick and, a long-time top prospect getting traded for a reliever. Why would we do that? And I think that's too far the other way. But then you had, I think fans on the other side that are like, oh, Harry Ford, isn't even really that good of a catching prospect, and his defense is suspect and the power is suspect. And there's a middle ground there that I think is the most true. And I'll explain all that why. But, you know how it is when things like this go down. One side tries to counter the other point, and now we have two very polarizing opinions, where I think the obvious part is actually in the middle here. And I think creates more nuance to this trade.
So there are a couple moving parts within this trade, and the whole trade was Harry Ford and Isaac Lyon, a pitcher, going from Seattle to Washington for a left-handed reliever that emerged as the Washington closer and one of the better relievers in baseball over the last 4 to 6 weeks of the 2025 season, Jose A. Ferrer. And if you haven't heard that name, it's because he was throwing his best when the Nationals were at their worst, and they were out of the conversation entirely. And what does that mean? Can this guy handle leverage moments in high pressure games? We have yet to see, because he's 25 years old and he hasn't really had the opportunity to do that in big time games. But he did handle the 8th and 9th inning for Washington, and he was really effective down the stretch. It's a lefty that can run it up to 100 miles an hour, sinkers a bowling ball, ground balls at will, and the changeup is absolutely nasty. I feel like a lot of people just branded this as a massive overpay by Seattle to go get a good reliever because they are relinquishing a top 100 prospect. Did you see it that way?
So no, not in that way. And that's where it's like the polarizing thing, right? Where I think it was probably a little bit expensive of an asset to trade for a reliever with, I think 3 years of control that is, again, was very effective to finish the year and has proven to be a solid arm. I mean, you look at some of the peripherals, he's going to be a peripheral darling in general. I know the FIP kept getting cited because he doesn't walk anybody, but that also is a positive, right? A lot of ground balls, doesn't walk anybody. That's going to be a guy that's going to be effective for you. He's going to need to figure out a way to get righties out the same way that he gets lefties out, right? Opponents hit like 320 off of Ferrer from the right side of the plate. Lefties hit like 185, but I think this was a clear need for the Mariners, and he fits a role for them, and he comes with control. I know they've been trying to move forward, and there just wasn't quite the right trade out there to make sure you're maximizing every cent on the dollar, I guess.
So I guess to that point, real quick, do you feel like they forced it at this point, knowing that they had to move him?
Yes, I do. I do, because I think they realize maybe the amount of teams that don't have a young catcher that they may prefer giving reps to may be dwindling, because you're not going to sit that long not having a clear future in your catching position. Either teams that haven't had a catcher for a little bit have a minor leaguer coming up through the ranks that they may now prefer to give the reps to, or may just go address in free agency. And then I think the other side is that, you don't want to hold on to Ford too long to where he kind of goes stale, like we talk about, and then the value almost craters a little bit. And we see that sometimes with some Dodgers prospects, and that's why they get out from under them. But I think in a vacuum, it would have been hard to get more for just Ford alone. But that's where I think the Mariners sometimes, where they can be a little apprehensive of the prospect packages that they're willing to part with, though I do love what they did at the deadline. I think there could have been some iterations of trades where they were adding more on top of Ford and maybe getting a more impactful player. It seemed like in the past, this type of trade was definitely out there from everything I understand. They could have made this type of trade a year ago or 6 months ago or whatever it may be, but maybe they were holding out for something more and it wasn't there. And they said, let's not wait any longer. Let's take the bird in hand. But I think in a perfect world, you're attaching another piece to Harry Ford and maybe bringing someone in more impactful. But at this point, it makes the big league team better now. It also has the next few years in mind. And, at the end of the day, I think they felt like it would make no sense to go into next year with Harry Ford still on the roster. And I agree with that.
Aram Leighton is with us in Orlando, sitting at the hotel at the MLB Winter Meetings. And everything that I've read about the Winter Meetings leading up to this week in Orlando is that while the free agent market may be less exciting than recent years, the trade market could really, really buzz. And it felt like Washington sort of kind of kickstarted this. Ferrer was not that notable headlining name of the available Washington Nationals. The other two, and we alluded to this a little bit earlier on in the show, Mackenzie Gore, CJ Abrams, those are the guys that have been deemed very available. And it just seems like Paul Taboni, the new president of baseball operations in Washington, is keen on ripping that Band-Aid off and starting this revival of the Washington Nationals, which is cool. And it feels like they can be one of the bigger players at the Winter Meetings this week.
100%. And I think that's part of the reason why I think there could be a surprise. Obviously, it's more likely that there won't be with the way things have gone of late, as we talked about. But, I think with the way that the Nationals can kind of affect the free agent market too, right? We see a lot of, pitchers that are still available that are going to command pretty significant deals. And if Mackenzie Gore is available, you're going to maybe look in that direction, but you're not going to wait that long and try to work out this trade and wonder what the Nationals are going to do, and then maybe miss out on some other free agents. So in that regard, I feel like we might see a little bit more of maybe pushing from other teams for clarity on what the Nationals are going to do. It seems like Gore is more likely to move than Abrams, but even then, interest in Abrams, right? Like for a team that may not want to spend a ton of money, that could be the way that they go. But also for a team that is also eyeing some other free agents, they may want some clarity in that regard as well. So I feel like the Nationals do hold a lot of the excitement of the next few days kind of in their hands, but it's part of the reason why I think the trade market could percolate a little bit while we're here, just because there's still a lot of free agents that need to come off the board. I don't think that's going to be the focus for a lot of teams while they're here. And I think teams are going to want to know what's going on for that next plan. So I'm hoping we see something happen with the Nationals. And I get it. Like, I think for them, it's clear that they're not going to be good in the next 3 years. So, you might as well listen and see what you can get out there with two of these players that are going to get you a big return.
And the question is, when do you get good? Because it seems like Harry Ford sort of kind of fits their mold of when they feel like the time is that they get good. So Harry Ford would be entering arbitration. He would still have 3 years when Washington is starting to get good if they are 3 years away. But is CJ Abrams still going to be under control at that point? Probably not. Is Mackenzie Gore going to be under team control at that point? Absolutely not. He only has one more year beyond 2026. So fascinating stuff. As it pertains to Gore, I was sitting here, I saw another report, and I immediately had a eureka moment. That's coming up in a second on the Just Baseball Show. Just Baseball Show rolls on. Jack McMullen sitting in my apartment in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Aram Leighton sitting on the floor at the MLB Winter Meetings in Orlando, Florida. We were talking right before we hit this last break about Washington possibly owning the winter meetings with what they can do on the trade front. And the reason that I say that, and I look at Mackenzie Gore as the poster boy. Obviously, there are Abrams conversations right now, but Gore is the poster boy because so much is being made about the starting pitching market right now. Cease got $210 million from the Toronto Blue Jays. Is Framber Valdez going to get 160? Is Ranger Suarez going to get 140? Is Tetsuya Imai going to get 170? Guess what? You can acquire Mackenzie Gore for prospect capital for effectively 2 years and $16 million. He's estimated about $6.5 million this year. You assume an arbitration uptick in his final year of control. That takes him to about $12 million. So if you're looking at 2 for $16 to $18 million for Mackenzie Gore, you're okay parting with a prospect.
Oh, yeah.
A team that has come up recently, and I saw the report on social media on Sunday night, that the San Francisco Giants, while they are balking at some of these larger contract offers for an Imai, for a Cease, guys like that, they may be hunting in the trade market. I saw a report on Sunday night that Bryce Eldridge is not totally off the table. So that got me thinking. Harry Ford is a guy that has proven what he needs to prove in AAA. He can be in the big leagues. Bryce Eldridge has effectively proven what he needs to prove in the minor leagues. He could probably be in the big leagues in a low-stress situation like in Washington. So I just had the simple thought. Mackenzie Gore goes to San Francisco for Bryce Eldridge. Poke a hole in that. Straight up. There's nothing else needed.
Ooh. I don't think I can poke a hole in that. I think some people may say, well, you want Eldridge maybe headlining, a package for a star with more control, but you just laid it out. If you want to get a pitcher, a middle rotation arm, you're going to have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. And with the control you have with Gore, you might be able to extend him. He's a young guy, so he may be willing to maybe not buy out 4 or 5 years, but you may be able to tack on a year or two extra, given how, on the younger side, he's going to be hitting arbitration. And then I love the combination of him and Ford. And by the way, a couple of things I wanted to mention real quick on Ford. I cooled on him a little bit in 24. He improved his quality of contact and just his offensive game across the board in 2025. His average exit velocity was up 2.5 miles per hour. His hard hit rate was up 8%. His contact rate was up 5%. And his OPS against velocity, 93 plus miles per hour, fastballs 93 plus, went from 620 to 884. So when people were saying like, Ford's overrated, I think there was a point where he was overrated, but now I think there's a point where he's actually made up a lot of ground. So I like that pickup for the Nationals and identifying that there. And I think to be able to go get an Eldridge who's kind of in a similar spot, right? Where if he's sitting in AAA for another year here, where he's going to rake in the PCL, the Giants may as well just roll him out to the big leagues there and see what he can do. He was up in the big leagues at the end of the year last year. You might as well even start him potentially at the big leagues this coming year, but that may affect his value, right? He's a guy that comes with a lot of swing and miss concern. He's not going to give you a ton of defensive value, so he needs to mash, and it may be a process until he gets to that point. It's not a great farm system in San Francisco, but you don't want to trade a bunch of pieces. This is one where you could trade one piece that is volatile, could be really good. Volatile can mean good too, right? He could hit 40 plus, but he could also never hit enough to be an above average regular. And his value may never be higher than it is right now. It's a risk, but I think it's a risk that given where the Giants are and what they've done, to only part with one prospect and be able to get 2 years of a guy like Gore, I think it would be worth it.
And financially, it makes a heck of a lot more sense for them when, again, they are balking at the idea of spending 9 figures on a starting pitcher via free agency. But Eldridge, on the Washington point, they have plenty of time to let him develop. If it takes 3 years baking in the oven for him to be the best version of himself at the major league level, which is a common occurrence, that's fine because like we laid out, Washington is pretty far away from competing. I do want to take in the last couple of minutes across Major League Baseball and just kind of scanning the trade market here. There are huge names that are, possibly being floated or at least talked about. Tarek Skubal is the biggest one. Ketel Marte in Arizona, the other one. Do you feel like we see trade markets start to populate for guys that we're not even talking about right now? It feels like it could be that kind of week in Orlando.
I think we get one unexpected trade. I think there's been too much Ketel Marte buzz. I think anything could happen. I'm sure, the Diamondbacks wouldn't be doing due diligence if they're not listening, especially given their pitching situation. But I just find it hard to believe that they're just going to, move Ketel. And with the way that we keep hearing all these, rumors and stuff like that, it almost seems too obviously outward, but we'll see. I think the Padres could surprise us with a trade while we're here, right? Like could they potentially figure out a way to move off of Cronenworth's contract which now actually looks a little bit better after the year that he had. I know they were talking about potentially Nick Pivetta. Dennis Lynn of The Athletic had reported about him potentially being an option. I just think that the Padres are probably going to want a little bit of financial clarity and just general clarity. And I think they could surprise us here maybe with a move. This is the time where I do see Preller potentially waking up a little bit.
Do you see a world where a top 20 to 30 prospect in baseball is moved this week or not really?
Ooh, what do you think? Answer the question with a question.
No, I don't think we get there. I guess it depends how much you love Bryce Eldridge. That feels like the best prospect that could be dealt this
for
week.
the sake of the question, it would be
head.
him. Yeah, for the sake of the question, let's say he's top 20. That'd be the only guy, unless there was some shock of a move. Or even if you have a Ketel Marte deal, there's a world where it gets pulled off without a top 20 prospect in the game. If you have a bunch of other, really good pieces in a big leaguer, I'm going to say no. Because that Eldridge situation, I don't think they're going to rush that. But if it is the Gore move that we just talked about, maybe that's the only way. But I don't see that being in any of the other prospects. I just don't think anybody else. I think Eldridge may be the best prospect that's reasonably could get traded, in this offseason.
Yeah, I guess it really just depends on the quality of big leaguer that is getting moved. Where if you want to limit the number of prospects that you're moving, like we're talking about San Francisco moving for Mackenzie Gore, then you have to go with a guy like Eldridge. But I could see a high volume prospect return coming back for somebody like, they're not moving Joe Ryan, but coming back for somebody like a Brendan Donovan or a Wilson Contreras. St. Louis also intrigues me too. Orlando as a whole, you said you got feelings that this could be an interesting week in Orlando. I want you, because we have about 45 seconds here, I want you to give me the position that makes the most noise over the next couple of days. Is it the starting pitching market starting to materialize, or is it bullpens, something else?
I think we get the pitching moving. I think so many teams are trying to figure this out right now on both ends of the spectrum. And there's so many free agents. You have Amai with a timeline here too. So teams need to decide if that's, even if you're not sure about him, you need to decide a lot sooner than the other guys. So, it's not one of those situations where you can just hope that you're going to hear back in time. So I think we see the pitching get going.
Interesting. Okay. Enjoy Orlando. Hope you get out to Disney for a little bit, because I know that's your jam.
I hope so.
We'll be back to wrap next right here on the Just Baseball Show. Stalling a little bit to add ourselves back to the stage, and we are good. Wrapping up the Just Baseball Show here. Jack McMullen back with Peter Apple. You've been listening to Aram and Ryan Finkelstein run through what's happening at the winter meetings. One more quick thing that I want to talk about before the show wraps up. The Pirates, according to Ken Rosenthal, have made Kyle Schwarber an offer. It's a 4-year offer. It's almost certainly, quote unquote, for $100 million. Peter Apple, when you see the Pittsburgh Pirates are waiting in the Kyle Schwarber waters, what say you?
I'm in a mental tug of war. There's a battle going on in my brain. One side of the rope is really, really excited because we want the Pirates to get involved. And they really are just a few bats away from being at least wild card contenders. And why do I say that when it's the Pittsburgh Pirates? Well, if you haven't noticed, they have a real rotation headlined by Paul Skeens. And then you have one of the best pitching prospects in baseball in Bubba Chandler. And you also have Mitch Keller. And of course, what could Jared Jones give them this year? And they also have numerous amounts of pitching prospects coming up the pipeline. So that's a real rotation. And it's pretty easy to at least form a good bullpen. That's what the Pirates have at least done at a decent level without spending any money. The other side of the rope, I don't believe them. Because we already got that report with Josh Naylor, where it was reported by The Athletic that the Pirates came out and offered Josh Naylor a competitive free agent deal. But then the Mariners sign him and the Pirates go back and say, oh, well, what can you do? The Mariners got him. And then it was later reported that they didn't make that offer at all. And now they reportedly, by Ken Rosenthal, 4 years, over $100 million for Kyle Schwarber. But you look at that and you say, he's probably going to get more than that. And why are they the only team out right now announcing to the world that we're offering big time free agents, big time contracts? We have to remember, this is a Pirates team where the biggest free agent deal that they've ever given out is Francisco Liriano at 3 years, $39 million. Now, they did give Brian Reynolds an extension worth about $106 million, but that's the biggest extension, and that's the biggest free agent contract. Do I want them to sign Kyle Schwarber? Yes. Would it make them better? Yes. Do I think it's a good fit? Yes. Do I believe it? No.
Bars, I can appreciate what you're saying here. I do feel, and this may just be me giving them the benefit of the doubt, I do feel like there's a bit more validity to the Schwarber pursuit than a possible Naylor pursuit. That felt like them saying, oh yeah, we were in hindsight. You know, like deal goes through, hey, the Pirates were interested. It didn't come out when the dust hadn't been settled yet. With Schwarber, the dust is nowhere close to being settled right now. So this is the Pirates, and I understand your skepticism in them signaling, hey, we're pursuing big-time free agents when no other team actively does that. They're doing that because they want to shed the stigma, right, of the Pirates not being in the waters of big-time free agents. But for this, like this timing, it's not that white flaggy to me, if that makes any sense. Like it's a little bit more valid to me, thinking that they may have a shot. And that actually does seem sort of kind of competitive. 4 for 100. It's not going to get it done. It will not get it done. But that's like nothing to scoff at for a 33-year-old DH.
I know, but to shed the stigma, you have to actually sign one of these guys. Being the 4th biggest deal for a guy when the guy already, if you offer the same deal, is going to take the deal with the better team, you are going to have to outspend those. So what it's telling me is that they aren't willing to do that. Getting in at 4th doesn't really tell me anything. It doesn't. That doesn't do anything for the fans, doesn't do anything for us, and doesn't do anything for the Pirates. All Bob Nutting and the Pirates front office, I believe, are trying to do is show their fans that we do have money, that we are willing to spend. But I'm sorry, we're the Pirates. These guys don't want to go here. I don't think that's the case. I think they're just posturing. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they sign guys.
Yeah, listen, nice job ending the show with a whole bunch of negativity. Plug what you got to plug. We got about 60 seconds here. Our Discord community is phenomenal. And this week during the winter meetings, our Discord community is as good as any Discord community you could possibly find. And I wouldn't know what the other Discord community looked like.
It's so much fun. It's the best baseball group chat in the world. You can find the link in the episode description to join for the entire month. It's less than a price of a sandwich, only $10. Congrats to everyone who took advantage of that free code. And the best way to support the Just Baseball show, go get yourself some Just Baseball merch right in time for the holidays.
I love it. That's Peter Apple. I'm Jack McMullen. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are listening to your podcast, whether that is Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Apparently people use Amazon Music. Thanks for doing that, I guess. Also on YouTube, thank you for joining us. We're going to have great content. We're going to be going live pretty much every night of the winter meetings. So be sure to join us at 5 p.m. Eastern at those times. And as always, thank you for joining us on Tuesdays and Wednesdays on Sports Grid. We'll be back live to talk to you tomorrow evening as the winter meetings continue in Orlando. Thanks, guys.